There's a big mistake that people who were traumatized as kids make when they're trying to heal. And this is a bad mistake to make because it can stop your progress. And it's when you connect with help and other people who have complex PTSD, there is a temptation to identify as a traumatized person and focus heavily on what happened to you and what the diagnoses might be of the people who hurt you. You know, I'm an adult child, my father is a covert narcissist, my mom's a rage-filled codependent, and so on. And having a name for these things is an important part of healing, and it can be such a relief and feel good at first. It's an acknowledgement, it's some validation that yes, what happened to you was bad and would likely have affected anyone. But I want to tell you why I think it's a bad idea to allow trauma to be so central to your identity or your life story. And I know it's a huge deal, but I'm encouraging you not to let it define who you are. Trauma is an injury. It's not an identity. You are not your trauma. You are you. And that's a really important way of drawing a line between what happened to you in the past and all that you can be and where you're meant to go in your life. The whole point of trauma healing isn't just to feel better, but to be liberated, to become your full and real self. And you want to hold a place for that by developing your own sense of agency. Do you know that word? That's the power to make decisions and guide your own life. Agency. You didn't have that when you were a kid. And sometimes people manifest trauma with a sense of helplessness or the belief that struggles in their life today are always coming from other people. They don't have their agency developed yet. But it's actually empowering to recognize that a lot of our struggles come from ourselves. I'm not blaming you for having problems. I'm actually happy for you if you do, because the problems that you create are the ones you can change. Now, personally, I think the focus of most clinical professionals, which is mostly on the past and other people, is a bit of a misappropriation of agency, because you can't change the past, and you have very little influence over other people, especially parents who may have abused you. Getting them to see what they did, or even better, getting them to change, it's extremely unlikely, honestly. So when you take those keys to your own healing, the place that you will focus your efforts, and you accidentally give it to past events or give it to other people by putting most of your healing focus there, well, you just lost the keys. And by definition, that's a loss of empowerment, a loss of agency. You can acknowledge and grieve and seek to understand what happened to you. That's part of healing. But that is the door. It's a door opening. It's not the final destination. There's more to the path. There's learning to heal your own neurological dysregulation, which is such a common symptom for people traumatized as kids. There's healing your disconnection from people, which is also a super common symptom of complex PTSD. And then learning to form loving relationships. Easier said than done. There's the awareness of your own self-defeating behaviors and the need to begin to change those. And then there's freeing yourself from old trauma-driven beliefs, like, for example, that you can only heal if your parents apologize. And I'm here to tell you, you can heal no matter what they do. And then there's coming into yourself and bringing your unique gifts to the world. And that's where healing really starts flowing. Your gifts turn from something you know about yourself to something that you do. It's a great joy when you find this and you start living it. So it's a terrible shame when people get stuck in the trauma identity. People are sometimes afraid to let that go for fear they'll have no armor, or that they won't have boundaries, or that their suffering will get the better of them. Or more often, given that we're dealing with emotional wounds that pressure you to be quiet and disappear, the trauma identity is one avenue where you get to speak up and be visible and be heard. Everybody needs that for a spell, but it can turn into a competition or an addiction. The antidote to identifying with your trauma is to identify with the vision of who you are and what you are becoming. And it involves facing the parts of your life where you're still making mistakes, where you're possibly hurting other people even, or at the very least, letting yourself down. Now, if you can't face yourself, or you deny that, like all people traumatized in childhood, you now are quite capable of re-traumatizing yourself, well, then you stay in a suspended animation of sorts, We all do it sometimes through conflicts, isolating, not taking care of ourselves, getting into bad relationships or staying in those relationships. That's how we get stuck in trauma. What happened when we were kids and had no agency is one thing, but if you can't shift your focus on healing how you treat yourself, how you interact with people in the world, then in a sense, you have become your trauma. Now, I know you know that you are technically not your trauma, but you know that feeling where you've just told a long story about some part of the past and then it feels like there should be some resolution feeling or a punchline or relief at least, and all there is more distress inside. Now, TV characters do monologues about their trauma and make it look like all you had to do was admit how bad it was and then bang, you've probably heard me complain about the Matt Damon character in Good Will Hunting. It was a good movie, but how realistic is it? He acts out, then he cries one time to his therapist, and then gets a little validation, and everything's great. He's done. Minnie Driver goes off to California with him, all because he just cognitively realized something. If only, right? It's not like that, is it? Because there's a neurological injury that needs healing. There is a lifetime of self-defeating behaviors to clear up. There's all the cultural strangeness of dysfunctional families, which is how you learn to navigate life. And now you need to relearn. And then there's that really high mountain to climb, romantic relationships, the final frontier, which makes you kind of have to go through all the phases of healing all over again before you can be at peace with yourself, before you can truly become yourself. It's a long road, but it's a happy project, making your way through these phases of healing. And it begins when you disidentify with what happened to you and focus on cultivating the best in yourself: love, creativity, confidence, professional success, vision, spiritual growth. But all these things get suppressed by, trauma. Trauma inflicted by others and by the self-sabotaging behaviors that we unwittingly bring upon ourselves. Isolating, resenting, blaming, living dishonestly or fearfully or selfishly. Everyone has a little of each of these negative tendencies, and most of us have one or two problems that really are hurting us and holding us back. And if you feel resistant to looking at this in your life, that's okay, because it's not time for you to look at this yet. But ask yourself, are you avoiding it because you feel safer in your old trauma identity? I suspect that some of you are going to tell me that all this talk of your own role in messing up your life is victim blaming. And I used to feel the same way, but I'll tell you why that turned out to be just more of my disempowered thinking. Anyone who was abused or neglected as a kid eventually was a victim, literally a victim. You were, I was, and you're not to blame for what others did to you. Okay, we agree on that. You are noble and holy for living through all that and keeping your spirit alive. And now your power to heal is in present time, in how you handle yourself and your relationships with other people. You were helpless in the past, but now you're the change agent. The changes are coming from you. And I know as well as anyone that it's confusing and clunky and not a straight path trying to change your life at this level. Trauma programs you with tiredness and bitterness and hopelessness and loneliness. That's all true. But working on yourself is still how healing gets done. It's not victim blaming. It's just the most practical way to make your life better. And that's what I mean when I say trauma is an injury, but not an identity. Trauma happened to you, but you are not defined by it. Now, one of the key signs that you're off track, that you're working on the wrong problem, is that when you try and solve a problem, nothing you do works. Sometimes when the solution doesn't solve the problem, it means you're working on the wrong problem. And I think a lot of traumatized people are working on the wrong problem or giving too much of their focus to it. And that's the problem of what happened in the past. It'll haunt you all by itself sometimes, I know. But ask yourself if your work to heal is liberating you or not. And if not, that's okay. But it could be a sign it's time to turn your focus to your own beliefs and actions. This is a potent shift. When you work on that, not only do you have power to make some actual changes, even though they're small at first, but you get this feeling in yourself like, yeah, I can do this. And this is where confidence and peace come from. When you know that whatever happens, you can trust yourself to figure it out. You'll find the part of you that can change, and you can work on that. Now, it's such a relief to be working on something that can actually change. Oh my gosh, the years I spent trying to convince my mother she should be sorry, she should be different. She died when she was a little younger than I am now, which was terrible. But I will say that when she was gone, it was 100% clear to me that any healing I was going to do going forward was not going to be from anything she said or did. I would have to do it. And so I did. You are more than your trauma, so much more. You are more than your trauma, so much more. And that is real. When you get stuck, you can't see that. All you can see is the trauma. And the memory of what happened can become more real to you than what's happening in present time. What a curse, right? Because present time is where you have agency. You can quit an addiction or leave a bad relationship or learn a new skill or heal your ability to connect with people. Now, obviously, you can't just snap your fingers and change those things, but you can take the first steps. And that's exactly how every healing journey begins. So if you're ready to shift your identity, try these two things. First, mix it up a little. It's not terrible to talk about the bad things or think about them some, but you might want to limit it to who you tell, when you tell them, so it's only to safe and appropriate listeners, and for a finite number of minutes. So if you're with a good friend and you're reminded of a traumatic memory, maybe talk about it for 5 minutes and then make yourself change the subject. You can also decide to just mention it but not go into all the details, or not mention it at all. Second, you can try this exercise. When you find yourself getting stuck in bad memories and hopeless feelings about your past, mark 2 columns on a piece of paper, right down the middle. And in the left-hand column, write about something bad about your past. Like for me, my mom was an alcoholic. And in the right-hand column, put something from about the same time in your life that actually strengthened you. So my stepdad was not an alcoholic, and he took care of us pretty well. On the bad side, our family was poor, and there was a lot of arguing about money, and a lot of times, if I didn't find a way to earn some money, I didn't have new clothes or food that wasn't free lunch. But on the other side, I learned to earn my own money at a very young age, and this prepared me to be an entrepreneur as an adult, which has been such a good thing to have. Now, on the left, I was neglected as a child, and on the right, there were 2 or 3 mothers of friends who really reached out and supported me and kept an eye on me. And so when you ask me about my life, if I'm identified with the trauma, I might say, well, my mother was an alcoholic, we had terrible financial problems, and I was neglected. But when I'm identified with the positive things, my story could also just as accurately be told as, I had a stepfather who took care of us. I learned entrepreneurship from some businesses I started as a kid, and this has provided a living for me all my life. And there were some kind adults in my life who I knew I could turn to if I needed help. This sounds like a completely different life, right? But it's the same life. It's just another perspective on it. I don't have to lie about the bad things that happened or try to pretend they never happened. I can keep those as memories, as facts of my life, but they're not the whole story. They don't define me. I choose to remember the good things that I remember too. And the more I get free from the trauma identity, the more good experiences that I have today to tip the scales toward a positive sense of myself and gratitude for the full experience of my life. You can try this. You'll be amazed how much you can lift your mood in the moment by just naming the good things within yourself, the good that you've encountered in the people you've known and in your experiences. In the comments section, I'd love to hear about the good things that you remember. And if you want to keep that good feeling going about how to feel happier, I've got a free PDF all about that, and you can download that right here, and I will see you very soon.